The Idries Shah Foundation Podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Alt. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation Podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we present excerpts from the Dermis Probe by Idries Shah. This audio has been made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. Preface. Goldfish. A man once wanted to observe goldfish. His aim was to see whether some of their peculiarities could help scientists to understand certain human nervous conditions. He found a patron to support the work and travelled to a far country to carry out his research. Soon after he started his goldfish watching, however, the authorities discovered that he lacked the necessary licenses and certificates. By watching goldfish, he had broken the law. Although a university graduate and an expert on the psychology of fish, this man was unaware of the local regulations and the mentality of those who made and interpreted them. In this book, you can find illustrated some of the peculiarities of thought in the country which is today's world, seen by its inhabitants and by those who call themselves visitors. If you think, incidentally, that a scientist is allowed to watch goldfish without permission, read the report of the Home Office under the Cruelty to Animals Act, published in 1968, where the offence is officially recorded. Idries Shah, The Institute for Cultural Research, P.O. Box 13, Tunbridge Wells, Kent. The Dermis Probe. Over 800 years ago, the philosopher Hakim Majdud Sanai of Ghazni, Afghanistan, in his Walled Garden of Truth, published this tale in a form corresponding to the needs of his time. His pupil and fellow countryman Jalaluddin Rumi immortalized his version in the incomparable Mathnavi towards the end of the 13th century. In 1965, this adaptation was filmed by the celebrated producer-director Richard Williams on the basis of a 20th century version by Idries Shah. The film won a citation as an Outstanding Film of the Year, being chosen for exhibition at the London and New York film festivals. The Dermis Probe, the prize-winning film by Richard Williams. Script by Idries Shah, from a story by J.D. Rumi of Konya, after H.M. Sanai of Ghazni. The Dermis Probe. Members of the Commission of World Scientists gaze at a bewildering sight, brought to us by television, using cameras equipped with close-up lenses of inordinate power. The picture pans across a greyish, striated surface, a vista of solid in space, broken here and there by fissures, sometimes curving, sometimes obscured by flat shadows. Nothing moves, nothing grows on the barren area. The harsh roughness of the site hints at a silent, empty mass, an outer skin as of a lava or a pachyderm, gnarled as though with immemorial age. As we watch, the American commentator's voice sets the scene of this documentary report. From the beginning of time, man has consistently and untiringly explored his environment. He has striven to extend the threshold of his knowledge, even driving probes deep into outer space. The British voice of the chairman of the commission is now heard, as the pictures of the object alternate, the angles varying, to give as complete a view as possible of the intimidating silent bulk. What we are considering here is the topography of the outer husk, as it were, the skin of the bulk of a mass whose characteristics are Now fades in the matter-of-fact report of the laboratory astrophysicist, giving a fragment of his results. Microscopic sections of this undoubtedly organic material betray a cellular nature strikingly akin to dermic tissue. The viewers can hear sounds corresponding with the laboratory operation. The astrophysicist continues. Staining the section with von Glauben's fluid, he is interrupted, for this is a democratic discussion. The German scientist's rejoinder is clearly heard. Von Glauben's fluid. May I point out that this was found to be a totally arbitrary method in early 1963, when it was superseded by Kaufer and Blackman's traumatic method. It is totally out of date. The chairman, like all good chairmen, switches the discussion to bring in another constructive scientist. Quite. However, pending further corroboration, to resume, we can be safe and indeed germane in asking Professor Mukherjee to give us some data on the basis of his Indian experiences with this material. Dr. Mukherjee is brisk and to the point. I can categorically state that positively this material cannot be conclusively classified by conventional categorization. All personnel engaged in the combined Calcutta and Benares project were objective in their subjectivity because they had been subjected to an intense program of induced nirvana. It is also incumbent upon me to say, but time is running short, and the director of the program fades in the unemotional voice of the American space expert to give another view. We have recently found that the radiocarbon-90 dating of this material gives us 1 to 3 years on the relative time scale with a calculated error of plus or minus 6.0. Tensile strength is directly proportional to bulk, and destruct temperature demonstrates little resistance. Since this material cannot be milled or rolled, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration considers it unsuitable for the fabrication of nose cones. It is therefore declassified. Now for the radio astronomer's results. We have definitely established that it is not a quasi-stellar source of radio propagation, but by employing our double basin transmitter we have been able to record marked scatter, and it could conceivably be used as a selective reflector if a substance with these characteristics were needed for advanced and extremely specialized work. The German scientist, asked for his opinion again, remarks, but Kaufer and Blackman have consistently shown that cellular differentiation can be more accurately demonstrated by high magnetic differential illumination and spectroscopic microanalysis. The chairman feels that the time has come to bring the program to a graceful end. I think that we can all safely conclude that while knowing nothing of the overall picture, all evidence tends to suggest that the specific material in question, while not static and seemingly singularly obstructive and of a rather fibrous character, will undoubtedly reveal itself in its own good time and indeed take its rightful place in the scheme of things. The camera zoom lenses are beginning to retreat as the American commentator gives his final ringing phrase, and will eventually fall before man's ever-questing search. While the credit lists of participants are being rolled across the picture, it is possible to see that the lenses have retracted to such an extent that for the first time the whole of the object, not just its skin, is visible. It is a large African elephant. But the motto of the Institute of Comparative Dermatography now nearly obscures the picture, getting larger as we read, "The parts are greater than the whole." This podcast is copyright 2016, the Idries Shah Foundation.